Hello and welcome to Dragon Combat Club's first Fireside Chat. This is meant to as an impromptu get to know you session, get to know the integral members of Dragon Combat Club. On the line right now we have Ari, Noah, Henry, and Antonetta, and we're just gonna bring up a basic concept today. And again, feel free to share as much as you feel like sharing. We will be putting this up on YouTube and possibly putting it up on our own podcast. But again, we want to talk about why you train specifically for this particular Fireside Chat to talk about, our experiences in the community, um, what kind of led us down this path and why, why we do what we do. And of course, Dragon Comic Club has been founded since April 2020. We are the sum of our parts. Everyone plays a huge and integral part because we are a volunteer-run initiative. Henry, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Hey, I'm Hen. Yeah, some people call me Hen Z, Darth Brazzers, Dr. Z for the ones who are picking up my gear. You want my training background and stuff, right? Or am I just passing it on after your name? All right, yeah, I've done like wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai on and off for the last 10 years or 11 years. John started learning weapons too. I think maybe 1 or 2 years ago. I've lost count already with John and a bunch of other folks like Conrad and Logan Lowe, some of them. And yeah, I was the original member during Combat Club. Passed that on to John. I used to do this training for just fun, build my own mental health. The community, which was a very diverse community back when I trained at Evolution Muay Thai. I'm currently training at Paxabellum, and under Chad Vasquez. And yeah, and then once 2020 hit, it became a matter of survival, right? And then not just my survival, but really other people's survival too. We live in a world where people just keep fucking killing you if you're Asian, and everyone's like, "But what? This is horrible." But or like, think about the other. So basically, no, you're on your own. We're on our own, and we have to be able to support each other, stay alive, and maintain our integrity as well. So that's like a short. I'll probably say more later, but that's just short of why I'm doing this. So I'll let John pass the mic to the next person.
Yeah, thank you, Henry. Noah, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I'm Noah. Um, I've been in the Dragon Club since also April 2020. What led me to join the Combat Club is this message to actually defend not only the Asian community, but also Black communities as well, for people in color just in general, as well as AAPPI, excuse me. Before then, I also practiced in martial arts when I was 15. Then I stopped when I was 18 and I kind of slacked off. So I figured this was a chance to actually, brush up on skills. I may have forgot a whole bunch, but I think I'm getting better at, holding some skills and whatnot. Definitely get the message of basically defending the elderly, making sure they're good. In terms of everyone else, I think the people here are cool, man. Until otherwise, I'm just kidding. But people here are cool. Yeah, that's about it. Any other questions? We're now about killing people. Just so you know, this is a group that relies on some tactics to solely defend yourself, not killing people or putting yourself in the ambulance. Just to let y'all know.
Thank you, Noah. And when did you start training, Noah? Like, when was the first initiation you had in martial arts?
Yeah, it was. So when I was 15, my first initiation to martial arts, when I was 15, it was February, 1999. I think that was my first initiation into martial arts. So ever since then, I did pick up a cue from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with Thai, but also Army combatants when I was in the Army. level 2 Army combatives. But I haven't been brushing up on that since, so I gotta fine tune that.
Cool. Thanks, Noah. I'd like to also introduce Ari as well.
Hi, my name is Ari. I live in Southern California, specifically Orange County, the real OC. The reason why I've been training, well, first of all, some weird instinct in 2021 was at the start of 2021 was telling me to train in martial arts. And I was just trying to think like, okay, California's kind of in lockdown right now, but maybe I should just kind of look into learning self-defense, because around February, that's when we've started hearing more and more like horrible murders of Asian American elders. And when I saw that there were these blog posts being spread around, it's like, oh, we should, as Asian Americans, we should dismiss all of this and focus on other issues instead. And I'm like, well, then who the hell is going to speak up for Asian Americans if we're going to not prioritize ourselves? And I just started just taking a stand for Asian Americans. I mean, after all, I was an Asian American studies minor. And that's around the time I've just started seeing Facebook groups that were trying to advertise free martial arts training, free self-defense training. And that's when I came across Dragon Combat Club. I attended a mass training workshop in April 2021. And after that, I just started to take more online training with them. And from there, I've also just started sought out taking in-person training with local family-owned like Filipino martial arts organizations at where I live. And the reason why, again, I train is I just felt like there wasn't a lot of folks in February 2021 who are really speaking up for Asian Americans in my neck of the woods. And after being nearly attacked when I was out and about in Little Tokyo, when we briefly lifted up lockdown orders, luckily, thanks to Dragon Comic Club, I learned how to de-escalate the situation. And that's what saved my butt from possibly being killed in Little Tokyo. And at the same time, it's like I also have, now as we're going back to some sort of normal reality kind of thing, and I'm just thinking about all the social places that I frequent, anime conventions, comic conventions, theme park related events, and think of all of some of the microaggressions and passive aggressive behavior that was presented towards me. I'm like, yeah, I need to protect myself. I need to protect the ones I love. And I just need to just look out, because I just accepted the reality that that there's not a lot, no one's really going to help us. And it's really hard for me to say that, because you have like a lot of these folks on social media, virtual signaling this and that. And I'm here just like, okay, I need to start standing up for myself, because if no one is, then who is? And all right, let me be that SOB who does stand up.
Yeah, well said, Ari. I mean, I think we're all feeling the effects of anti-Asian hate in the community. And of course, you started training recently starting with Dragon Combat Club. And we've had numerous women in the API community come in and actually start training with us and realize that they needed additional training. Any other thoughts on that?
In terms of training?
Yeah.
Yes, just after nearly having an attack on me back over the summer, a couple weeks after AAPI Heritage Month, I decided to take training a lot more seriously. And I think that was around the time I started carrying around a tack light with me. I always carry around a flashlight with me at all times. I make sure, like, you can't really see here, a lot of the way I shop now is I have to I feel like I have to shop for dresses that have really deep pockets. Yeah, this is like my hand in my pocket, like here. And these are pockets that are large enough to hold an iPhone 13. So that's kind of like part of how I kind of had a little bit of a lifestyle change. Like, okay, I need to start looking into dresses that will hold a flashlight. I also had to just, again, I started taking like more in-person classes just so I can kind of get that feeling. And I remember like that first time I was taking a training class with Ticket Tactics. I hope I said the name right. When I was taking a class with them, I was like, oh, sweet. I get to like finally punch things and just get a feel for power. And that was also really helpful in just like helping me with aim, helping me with power. Because as much as I enjoyed virtual classes, like they were always a really awesome workout and whatnot, but getting that in-person training and just working on my power, that also really helped a lot. And just kind of, especially like just after I had that scare in Little Tokyo, wherein, okay, I need more training. And I probably need to strap up, especially if I'm going to be out and about, and especially if a lot more things are opening up this year. I need to like be prepared and just stay ready. I mean, that's the reality that I have to face with right now. I know just prior to all this, we've heard the phrase, okay, let's punch Nazis. And I was just sitting there. It's like, okay, what if the guy is larger than me? What if I'm a 5'1" small Asian gal, small spelled SMOL. And I'm like, what do I do here? Especially if I'm going up against like an attacker that can be larger than me. And I was just asking a lot of my friends all these questions. And this is like around 2016. And they were like, oh, just punch him. Like, where do I punch him in the face? And you had like all this hot air because it was just so cool to say, like, yeah, punch Nazis. Like, yeah, like, yeah, you should. But it's like, well, how? And what is the most effective way to do so? And I feel that being with Dragon Combat Club, I I feel a lot more confident now than I did then in terms of striking.
Outstanding. Thank you, Ari. Yeah, before we get into like too deep of a concepts, because again, we're just trying to break the ice. So I'll go ahead and just go back to the original question about like why I train. Uh, I actually started training in college. My parents didn't actually allow me to take martial arts classes until I left the house in college because they thought martial arts were too violent. I was a big fan of Power Rangers growing up. And my parents saw me actually like liking Power Rangers and like they thought I was gonna like kick my boys' ass. Like I had gotten into a lot of fights when I was a kid. But I still believe that if I had learned martial arts at that time, I probably would have had more discipline in my life. Right, Henry? A little bit more discipline if we had learned martial arts early on in age. But I really only started learning then, and I was learning, second or third hand from individuals. One of them being Raymond Long, who is of course one of the original founding uh, partners of this group of Dragon Comic Club. Um, so Ray was a huge motivation in my life. Even at that time, I had no idea he was a Sifu rank. But he taught the group a lot about basic structure. He didn't really dictate terms or like said this form is the most powerful. No, he was always like very supportive, and everyone in the group was very supportive. Like we had an equal amount of just playing around, horsing around, as well as like trying to test out the different tactics in actual combat. Just obviously very slow and very controlled. So that was really my first exposure to martial arts. But after I got my first job, I knew I had to take a Filipino martial arts class. It was specific because I really enjoyed Kali and weapons-based martial arts, even at a very young age. And I've always enjoyed the thought of, having something in my hand as being something empowering. Um, not to necessarily strike someone with, but to, again, just kind of use as a force multiplier if the need ever came up. Personally, I'm a person who is 5'6". I've always been the shortest person in my class. Additionally, I'm Asian, so like I didn't have my growth spur until like 18 or 19. So by the time I had started Filipino martial arts class, which was again through college with the Filipino United Student Organization at Stony Brook, because they were going to different, Filipino shows, more or less, to compete against different colleges. So that was really my first exposure to Filipino martial arts. So since then, I've been learning Filipino martial arts for about 14 years. And it's been a love obsession for me. And it's taken from a modern form. But even along this journey that I've had with other martial arts and training with awesome people, like my old college roommate was a Taekwondo Olympic champion and candidate. I had traveled to go see my girlfriend at the time in Thailand, trained in Muay Thai with like some awesome coaches. Was traveling the country for work as well. Went out to California to go to the Inasata Academy. I was in Michigan for a period of time, training with law enforcement officers and training Kali, as well as a multitude of martial arts is there. And the commonality is that everyone I've trained with, in person or virtual, has been so cool, super awesome. And there's no community as this, right? There's no other community that you can like freely punch someone in the head, apologize 5 seconds later, and then come off the mat and everything's kosher, right? Everything's good. Right now I'm also teaching as well with Dragon Combat Club. Also teaching with We Are Brave. So I see this as an opportunity to not only learn, but also to give back. Everyone's going to have their own individual philosophies, and kind of the motivation for me to continue teaching and empower the community, and especially the API community, as well as others, is because I realize, I'm still relatively young, right? That may not be the case in 50 years. I'd rather do something that keeps me in shape, keeps me empowered, keeps me honest, especially because you have to keep yourself physically honest. And most of all, I think about 50 years from now, who's going to defend me, right? So I might as well bring these skills to the community now. I'm not saying that I'm going to be helpless by any means, but I'm hoping that either my kids or my niece or nephews will be able to stand up for me when I can't. And so it's funny because I guess I'll show you guys a picture of my niece. And this is my niece. She's adorbs. But the funny thing is, with everything that's going on right now with Stop Asian Hate, and I think me teaching online at my sister's house and my brother-in-law's house, they were like, why are you doing this? This is the silliest thing in the world to teach martial arts virtually. And to a certain extent, I agree, right? I mean, there's going to be no replacement for in-person practice. There's not going to be any replacement for going to an actual gym, getting thoughts from an actual coach. But I also stick to this other policy: is there's never not a good time to train. Should be always training. Should always be keeping an eye out on situational awareness. And I see this as a way of giving back to the community. So we're joined again by another person, Natalie. If you want to share your name, experiences, why you kind of like started studying, and why you train.
Yeah, I'm Natalie. I'm a Korean Chinese American, and I'm 22. I just graduated from Rutgers. I studied engineering, and the reason why I ended up joining and starting to train was because my job that I got was in New York City, and with the attacks I was seeing, and not only the attacks I was seeing on the news, but also, personal experience, like really kind of made it, it really made it real to me. Um, so that's why I am now here at DCC.
Do you mind going into your attacks, or do you not feel comfortable sharing
My what?
your attack? Do you mind like sharing the details of that, just so that other women in the community are?
Oh yeah. There's. I was gonna say like which one, but I can like there's a few that have ranged in severity. I would say like before DCC, again, like I take the train from New Jersey into New York City Penn Station, which is, right like in a very busy area. And at least 3 times that summer, I was either followed around the train station, and not even at night, this was like in the day, either followed or just had like insults and verbal harassment, right? And then when the murder of Michelle Go happened, I think it was right after that I decided to, that I found DCC and decided to officially join. And what's crazy is that the first time that I came to practice, right, was on, I think it was one of the Saturday practices. And then 2 days afterwards, I was going to work on the train. And in the New Jersey station, I was actually being followed by someone. Like I noticed, like when I was like, I noticed he was waiting outside, and when I walked in the train station, he went in behind me. I went into the Dunkin' Donuts that was inside. He ended up walking inside too. I went upstairs. He followed me upstairs, and then I noticed him just looking, like just eyeballing me and like looking over. And I think that because I was like in that situational awareness mindset still from like the past 2 days, I didn't have any sort of like tools or defense tools or safety gear on me, but I ended up just reaching in, like I have a giant coat that I was wearing. I just reached my hand in my pocket and just kind of moved it around to make it seem like I was armed. And then 10 seconds later, he left. So I definitely understand how important situational awareness is after that.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, as long as we're on this topic, right? There is a lot of concerns about situational awareness. Even before I started training, my parents would tell me all the time, like, "Hey, listen, New York City is not very safe. You still have to be very aware, right?" Obviously, this is during the heyday of crimes going on in the 80s and 90s, but obviously the city has reformed a lot since then, right? So Natalie, question for you, like, what do you tell the people about how maybe New Jersey or New York City has changed from your view?
Yeah, I constantly say like, like I grew up in Jersey since I've been here since I was 8. So yes, I've never lived in New York City, but I've been, coming in just to hang out with friends or whatever since I was a kid. And I remember when I first started my job, right? Like usually, coming to the city a few times a year, maybe like every other month to do something. But I remember when I started coming in to work in person after COVID, I was like, oh my God, things are definitely worse now. Like I think like all throughout my teenage years that I'd go into the city and walk around. I had maybe like 1 or 2 incidents over the course of 10 years. Whereas within 6 months from like July up until January of 2022, so July 2021 until like now, basically. Like again, there's that entire handful of incidents that have happened in that time. And I mean, like, I don't have to tell you, like, there's data out there to yeah, I'm not sure if this is like, I can't tell like how aware people are also, because sometimes I think like this is so obvious, like at least to me, I'm like, oh, this is so obvious. This is like such an obvious problem that like I deal with, and so many other people, so many other Asian people. It's just like an obvious like part of like living to us. And it always blows my mind that I'll tell people about these things and they're like, oh my God, like I had no idea. Or like, yeah, I share an experience of like being attacked and people are like in disbelief. So yeah, the level of awareness just blows my mind sometimes.
Yeah, that brings up a great point. There's a lot of people in the community that I talk to on a normal basis, even doing grassroots work in New York City, and elsewhere. Is like they don't believe like actually Stop Asian Hate is happening. Like all this anti-Asian rhetoric is happening. So I know, Ari, you've had a decent few conversations regarding this. I think we all have as well. I'm going to pass it to Henry after you as well. Go ahead, Ari.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a little bit of background. Anytime I would just bring up any Asian American related issue, whether it be yellow facing or anything related to that, I would immediately get shut down because I would be greeted with the phrase, "Well, that's just small potatoes." Like what is wrong with the word Orientalism? What is wrong? What is wrong with yellow facing? I'm like, I can tell you what's wrong with it. And anytime I would like try to discuss these issues, they would immediately be shut down by the folks who claim to be progressive or woke. And I'm like, guys, like these are discussions that we should be having about Asian Americans, and do not shut me down about it. And then when I started seeing that Stop Asian Hate was trending, I saw like all these hashtag type of movements within, I'm part of the fashion community. So there was like this huge hashtag thing called, it was like something to the effect of, we are AAPI princesses, and we would share, all of us, just to celebrate the different faces of Asian beauty. And then after that was done, everyone was just back to quote unquote normal, and the people who are in charge of these hashtag like visual movements on Instagram, this was like last May, and then here we are in 2022 with so many attacks against Asian women, not a peep out of them, nothing being shared about like, guys, this isn't a trend that you do for clout. This is something you keep doing and doing and doing. And again, like just last February, when a lot of Asian women, and these are Asian women, mind you, who were pro Hillary Clinton and who are very anti-Trump and wore like the pink hats in 2016. So I would imagine y'all should be on our side. But when you're telling me that we should not prioritize ourselves and we should prioritize other things going on, and just to like minimize our pain and suffering coming from our own people, it is really frustrating. It's really sad. And I think that's what really broke the straw on the camel's back for me, to just, hey, like what you're saying here and what platform you're using, this is extremely harmful, that you're downplaying and minimizing violence against Asian American women. And I had to also make peace with losing friends out of that. And that might have been the hardest thing, but at the same time, I feel now that I've let go of those fake friendships and been able to speak my truth freely. And a lot of friends of mine who identify as Asian Americans feel they're not quite at that stage where I am right now, where I can really speak about these issues. But there's like, yeah, thank you for speaking up on these. I don't think I'm there yet to have a voice, because I've been so pruned and primed in my youth as a woman to like keep your head down, stay quiet, do as you're told, and not to like make any noise. But I'm just at a point right now with so much denial and so much violence and racism against us. I'm like, I have to speak up, because if I don't speak up, then who will speak up? And also just finding niches like communities like Dragon Combat Club, Sisters in Self-Defense, and all these martial arts circles that I kind of been getting involved with. I felt a lot more support of issues regarding my identity and being able to talk about my identity than any other community I've been involved in. And this is someone who's coming from the anime community, where you would think that Japanese and Asian culture would be celebrated. This is the same community that had cosplayers defending Yellowface, writing it off as like no big deal. And also I can count on my single hand 5 anime conventions that had to stop Asian hate social media posting or have donated to a charity. But it was just really surprising that we have like all these hundreds of anime conventions across the country, and only 5 of them either worked with a charity or have made a social media post in response to a shooting in Atlanta. That's just my 2 cents for now.
Yeah, so we saw a huge uptick of API women who actually joined Dragon Combat Club the week following the Atlanta shooting. So again, the Atlanta shooting, was targeting Asian massage parlor in Atlanta, where 6 Asian women lost their lives, as well as 2 non-Asian women. But it's just an incredible tragedy. Matt, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, give my perspective, because I have been on both sides of this myself. Like, it was only so recently that I was like, yeah, I'm gonna like speak my truth and just live it and live out my actual identity, and not just do whatever the social climate says. I think like being before that, it was always just a question of like, yeah, what should I be doing? Like, what is the social climate? What should I be doing? Like, let's not speak up. We're like almost as if you're like gaslighting yourself to be like, oh, it's not as bad. This isn't worth bringing up. Or like maybe you get mad for a second and then you just try to like rationalize it and convince yourself that it's no big deal. But I think at least for me, the turning point was the Michelle Go incident. Just because that was like, there's no way you could like, there's no way you could look away from that. And I only just keep getting more and more confident that this is like an actual issue as time goes on. And I think there's definitely like a barrier there that for a lot of like Asian women in particular needs to kind of be like stepped over. Something to think about and work on. I can pass it to, I think, Noah, right?
Actually, sorry, before I cut off Noah. Actually, so Natalie, you said you're looking at this from both sides, right? So did you feel like before Michelle Go, you were ignorant about what was going on, and like, was there a false perception maybe that was happening not in our own communities and in suburban communities, and it was just
I think
something on news?
All of what you just said was more of the rationalization, right? But before all the rationalization happens, like the first immediate emotional response is just, I don't want to be socially isolated. I don't want to be the only one saying stuff about this and risk people looking at me like I'm crazy. I don't want to risk people thinking that I'm like complaining or making a big deal out of nothing. So that's like the emotional response that happens first, right? And then, then after that comes the rationalizing of like, oh, well, like I live in the suburbs, I'm probably safe. But it definitely, I can tell you that the primary reason why I, on the other side, the primary reason was always just, I don't want to be socially alienated because no one else is talking about this in my immediate circles.
No.
Hello. Okay. Before I thought about, joining the, I got the offer of joining the Dragon Combat Club. I did have some false dialogue in my head because I did have to take risks, but these risks were in my head. I knew what was going on with a lot of things. Attacks on people of color, attacks on AAPI, especially women, and so forth. So these dialogues went on like, oh, you should be defending Black people. They're probably going to say something like you should be defending your own race, or oh, you're a sucker if you just defending people that don't like you, because of the fact that they're not going to blow the back of you. All these false dialects. But for me, my philosophy is different. I believe we are human beings too, and no one should ever deserve this treatment. So I went in anyway. I went in with my own mind and my own philosophy, saying that the mistreatment of Asians in general, Asian women especially, should not be tolerated. I feel everybody else should be on that same page also. The mistreatment of Black women should not be tolerated, but I believe everyone should be on that same page also. So that's why I went. In terms of training, and basically seeing all these women trained, it's fucking awesome. I feel like every woman should be trained in some type of martial art to defend themselves. Even if she gets out of work, maybe at midnight, she's able to defend herself. Definitely. In terms of the Atlanta shooting, I definitely had a lot of thoughts in terms of that. Definitely with the hyper fetishes that people have towards Asian women, which I also view as disgusting, because they're human beings too, and they should not be, fetishized because of the fact that these people so excited to say that. When the cops defended him and they just kind of brushed it off, I'm not gonna lie. Most of us was like, "Oh yeah, that's typical," and it is typical, and it makes me feel like no one goes to bat for anyone except if you're white. I'm going to say it flat out. So the fact that there are so many women joining the combat club and training to defend themselves, regardless of the circumstances that been put before them, is definitely an awesome, awesome idea. I think there should be more of that, not just getting them into remote classes, but maybe like once a month put together something, get more women to join, definitely show them a few things. Maybe if it's like a few dudes, just to get them safe, so there won't be another victim. So there'll be less victims of, I would say the right word, maybe, because sometimes I feel like, yeah, pepper sprays are good, pens are good, but what about that one day when they left that all home and had to go in the overhand? Tactics like that. Just make sure to get them simple. in terms of working with the Combat Club, in terms of spreading our message, I think um, having these fireside clubs is also a good way of getting our message out there. Hopefully someone hears this, hears everyone else's story, and be inspired to actually join the Combat Club and actually uh, share their story and influence someone else.
So I know one of the things that I think John asked was like, I think when you're at, I think when you have the views that you have, just like Natalie said, just I think the idea of speaking out, or just as Ari mentioned, the idea of speaking out, right, puts, especially when you're like an API that lives in an urban area such as New York City, puts you in a position where you will be blatantly misunderstood, where you'll frighten the living crap out of people, especially if you're like a progressive API that also wants people to not die. I think that's a very rare view, right? API, progressive, and doesn't want to get murdered. I think it's an area where someone does, where there's a lot of people who normalize the idea of you getting killed, right? That's the reason why I say this is because, after people like to see this is Heritage Month as like a trend, right? Boom, after May, everything is gone. A lot of us were introduced to sort of violence, like Gary, right afterwards. Or in my case, the 2 days after the Atlanta massacre, someone came after with a knife. And then I think right after API Heritage Month ended, Grandma was just shopping for fruits, minding her own business in Elmhurst. And so were two other elderly. And then there was a guy with a giant wooden handle, of that knife, sticking out of his pocket like he gave zero fucks. And he just approached us, and I had to basically scare him away by gesturing towards my own pen. And things have gone down, have went down. Like if your head isn't out of the sand by now, I mean, things have gone really downhill. And there's a lot of reason. I think since of course, as a disclaimer, anti-Asian racism has been here for hundreds of years, but it saw its initial spike when COVID-19 arrived. And as you all know, we've dealt with a lot of denialism, right? It's like, oh, other people have it worse. What about X, right? You don't have to deal with this, but they do. Oh, look at how you Asian Americans are racist towards other minorities. It's like all these whataboutisms, they're not coming from, they are stupid, right? But they're not coming from people that are universally seen as fucking morons. These are coming from people who are educated. These are coming from people who are considered experts on this topic, right? They have their blue checks. They went to Ivy Leagues. They went to Little Ivies. And these aren't just random people we know from the internet, right? Not some, all right. They're people we know. They're people, they could be our siblings. In my case, I grew up with one, right? So of course I'm interpreting it so I used to interpret such statements from a matter of good faith. So guess what? As I've said many times, right? So one of the earliest people I know who endured like overt racism due to COVID was my own fiance, right? And I didn't feel safe telling people about what she went through because I knew it would be minimized, right? I saw these people who got stabbed, right? I think it's the Sam's Club. They've gotten jumped, and nobody said anything. And I would hear sort of the same rhetoric, right? Either, like Natalie said, it's like when people did talk about anti-Asian racism, it was almost in a way that I couldn't agree with, right? Because a lot of it came with the minimization of other people's suffering, right? From just dehumanizing other groups. I'm like, I wasn't about that. I had training partners who were black and brown. I would never say a shit about other people about them as a group. It's also fucking dumb, right? And then you had people who were acting like it was no big deal, right? People who had their pink ribbons, people who voted for Hillary, people who were anti-Trump. But guess what? They were anti-Asian too. So if you were gonna go to your, so it's like if you were gonna come to them for help, well, I think you were shit out of luck. And a lot of us were looking to those people for help, right? Hoping they would see reason as each attack got progressively worse. And I did do that for a while. The reason why I was one of the first people to have spoken out, October 2020, which is like very early on, was because of a schoolmate of mine, a Black woman who actually inspired me to speak out, and also the kind of person that we were told to be silent about, right? But instead of telling me, oh, you people don't have it, she found out what I did for with DCC. She realized like the horrors of what happened, including the guy who got his arm broken by 8 people for being mistaken as Chinese. He was a Japanese dude. And she reacted the way any human being would, and that essentially opened my eyes. But anyways, at the end of the day, though, like, so I was one of as I was one of the first people vocal, I've stopped being as vocal. I've sort of resorted to more direct action because I've come to just this regrettable conclusion that there are people who are indoctrinated and educated a certain way that are not interested in doing better. They're not even interested in helping other minorities, even if they put the BLM on their hashtag. They're not interested in helping other people. They're interested strictly in themselves. And these are individuals who are a lot more comfortable with us being dead than to admit that they are wrong. Every attack I see, right, as it gets worse and worse, I think every one of us assumes, when will they finally open their eyes? When will it be their turning point? And I've come to realize that there is no turning point for us. They're set in their ways. How can you see what happened to Yao Pan Ma and Michelle Guo and Christina Unili and repeat the same script of this is horrible, but blah, 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 blah. This is horrible, but, and tell us all these things not to do and never tell us about what to do, at least in the short term. It's almost like a mega church that scams us, where it's like, if you have faith in this thing that may work like 5 or 10 years down the line, you'll be rewarded. And if you speak out against us, there is something, that is your fault, even though you're the one suffering from it, right? I've had to accept that reality for me to find peace. And I'm hoping that other people will too. Not just so they can not be as confused, not just so they can be less tormented inside, but so that we can take direct action to really change the circumstances you live in. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Natalie.
Yeah, I think I think one correction I want to make is that exactly. It's not that there wasn't anyone speaking out on it. It was just that there was no voice out there no big voice out there that I really agreed with, and so that inherently was like, okay, so if I'm going to speak out, I'm going to be speaking out in a way that's just on my own little island. Thankfully, it's not like that anymore because I'm here and everyone here has a strong voice I agree with, so thank you. But I think my whole thesis on this is just that this society does not empower Asian people. That's what I think. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that at the same time that I kind of broke through that barrier and started standing up for myself, I started standing up for myself in like every way in my life, like at work and school, relationships, like just in making friends and socializing, everything. So that is not a coincidence. In an ideal world, it shouldn't have to be that dramatic of a thing. In an ideal world, it's like you're empowered as a kid, as a teen, as a young adult. That's how it should be. Unfortunately, I think it's still like a work in progress to create that, larger environment that does empower Asian people from the time they're born here. So like, I think like Henry was motioning towards this, but basically it's the only choice is really for us to take responsibility to do it, which is again, that's just what we have to do at this point, I feel like.
Yeah, just gather thoughts on just weaponizing groups in terms of just in general, just not our voices. I feel like we're speaking up for just cause, but I'm actually touching up on people who just get into groups and basically using it just for clout. And then at the end of the day, spit anti-Asian hater, anti-black hate, and you just hear this. It's like, wait a minute, then why are you here? Why are you here? Just here for Facebook pictures, here for Instagram pictures, and basically they just want to actually inject white supremacy ideology, and you just basically you hear that rhetoric. You hear it in, while they're marching and basically trying to influence the group to stop doing this. This is not good. This is not what society wants. If you feel like this is not what society wants, then why are you mistreating as a whole? That's the reason why we march. That's the reason why we invented something called a Dragon Combat Club to actually defend ourselves from ideology, from people who are in groups for clout that are dangerous, that are injecting views that don't coincide with what the message is, and it's injecting to others, and they feel like it is their responsibility to go take it out on it because they're the responsibility that this is happening, which is not true. I also feel that, us as a group, it is our responsibility to not only look after our own lives and train like we're looking after our own lives, but basically the lives of others.
Yeah, this kind of white supremacy ideology, again, this may be learned from, education systems that, you know, Asians don't have the power, but we do, right? I mean, we should feel empowered. We've been in this country as early on as when it was founded, and we have been here for a long time. Like some of those restaurants in Chinatown, New York City, have been there for like 300 years, and they still continue to do business. And like this is not only in New York City; this is everywhere else in the country as well. Like what makes Asian Americans like so ingrained in their belief and ideology is obviously the reason why we're here, right? Last minute
It's
thoughts.
yeah, it's also like people being taught out, not being taught true history, but they're just sticking to history books rather than true history, what history teaches us, rather than a history book. Like, oh, it's in the book. This is liable proof. It's the same when someone gets attacked. It's like, oh, where's the proof when you're attacked? And you could be bloody. You could have a videotape on it and so forth. It's basically the type of ideology that is absolutely dangerous. And that's why we were formed to actually battle that ideology.
My final thoughts is I might feel alone in my circle, my bubble here in Southern California in terms of feeling safe. I might feel alone in that, but you know what? Thanks to Dragon Combat Club, I have my fist. I got Guile's theme in my heart. Stay ready and stay strapped.
So yeah, so as you know, like So isn't here tonight. He teaches on Fridays. He will always say, "Stay strapped or get clapped." And I think that has been what has kept us alive. Like I said, we don't go around looking for people to clap. But okay, that's probably poor phrasing. But but what we do is that we go about our lives, and someone thinks that's a good idea to try to attack us. and they literally find out that's a horrible idea to do so, and that's what has stopped many attacks. I am hoping the weapons don't the tools that whatever character don't get used. At the same time, I'm hoping that nothing gets used on us. That's survival is sort of the first and foremost thing. And I think a lot of people like to talk about white supremacy. Well, guess what? White supremacy is not comfortable with people of color taking their safety into their own hands, right? They prefer them getting murdered or having these sort of meaningless debates about that aren't going to stop them from getting killed, right? What we do is going to make some people uncomfortable, and they're going to have to check their own damn privilege. So yeah. So I guess I'll pass on the mic to whoever next.
No, any last thoughts?
Nothing else to say. I think Han said it all. I think that's just all I was thinking. Yeah. So we gotta yeah, that's all I've been thinking about, is that we just have to find our own voice, because it's not out there on any political side, it's just not there. None of these like big megaphones are speaking for us. So
For sure.
so
And that's the kind of reason why I wanted to create this space, right? Just to allow for everyone to, speak their truth, as well as, we obviously have a vast majority of actually women in Dragon Combat Club. We don't obviously just train Asians. Noah was a founding member and partner on this adventure. And just going back to what Henry said, is like, to give a PG version of it, because he loves to give R-rated versions of things, is what Dragon Combat Club is we are looking to prepare for the worst and plan for the best. In which case, there hasn't been a lot of representation for APIs in general, so we have to make our voices heard. And this is exactly the point of this fireside chat. And I hope that you'll be able to join us for other fireside chats in the future. Feel free to find us on Instagram.com/Dragon Combat Club. No spaces, no underscores, no dashes. You can also find us at Facebook.com/Dragon Combat Club. And I hope that you will join us again. So good to hear from everyone here. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you soon. Bye.